Hello and welcome back, and this is yet another election prediction for the 2028 election. And this is actually the most likely of the candidates to be running in 2028. For example, the most accurate pollster, Atlas Intel, according to this article, found that Pete Buttigieg is leading the pack of Democrats for the 2028 nomination, and out of Republicans, Vance is leading the pack. So this is most likely what's going to be happening. And for a very, very early prediction, let's see who would win in the 2028 election. The interesting thing about this election is that neither of the two candidates were really that prominent, were really that relevant, in fact, just like 6 years ago. I mean, Vance became Secretary of Transportation in 2021, and before that, Mayor of South Bend. JD Vance, he became Senator from Ohio not that long ago either, and then became the Vice President of the United States. So really, neither of the candidates were too well known until recently. And it's funny that the candidates now are going to be running for president most likely. So let's see, out of the two guys, who will win the election in 2028. And it is interesting to say that Vance is very popular in the Midwest, whereas Buttigieg, he is from Indiana, but there was a little bit of a hiccup when he was Secretary of Transportation in the Midwest area. And for that reason, I think this election could go differently than many Democrats may hope. But let's start with the safe states as usual. I mean, it's pretty obvious which states are safe. I do think Colorado and New Mexico will be more safe with Buttigieg than with Harris, because I think that Buttigieg is more popular than Harris is. I mean, considering he is leading the pack this early, I do think that he will win some states that weren't necessarily safe for Harris, but I think there are certain areas where he will do worse than Harris. But in any case, these are the states that are safe for both candidates, and we can see that after marking down the safe states, Nebraska's second is not safe, in fact. But after marking down the safe states, which I'll include Ohio in that category, after marking them down, it seems like Vance is behind. But once Vance gets the states of Florida and Texas, which he will win, he is up by 22 electoral votes, which is pretty significant, with the swing states up for grabs. I'll quickly fill out these two since they kind of cancel each other out. And then I'll fill out Maine at large for Buttigieg. And now here are basically what are the important swing states in this election. So a little bit about Buttigieg. He was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. He rose to prominence in the 2020 Democratic primaries. And then after that, Biden gave him the Secretary of Transportation role, which usually some cabinet roles are given to people that run in the primaries but end up losing but have a nice following behind them, which Buttigieg is one of those people. He was named Mayor Pete. He was pretty well known even as the mayor of South Bend. I mean, he has an interesting story. For example, he went to Harvard, he went to Oxford, he served in the Navy, he was a lieutenant. He was the first openly gay cabinet secretary, and, you know, he is pretty young as well. Vance has an interesting story as well. Vance is young. Vance became vice president. Vance wrote a very popular book. He basically rose from rags to riches, and, you know, so this is an interesting election. I think the debates could also be interesting between these two guys. Both seem to be pretty sharp and very young, so it could maybe be like a blast from the past, like a debate we saw between, I guess, like Nixon and Kennedy. Maybe something like that will yet come back, but we'll see what happens. But it is interesting to have younger candidates this time around. So with regard to the election, I think that Buttigieg will get the state of Virginia as well as New Hampshire, because even though he did have his hiccup as Secretary of Transportation, let's see if we can find it on his Wikipedia page. He has a few interesting, basically a little bit of controversies. And then here we have it, the freight train in East Palestine, Ohio. So that's why I think Ohio will safely go to Vance. Buttigieg isn't really that popular because This did happen under Buttigieg's, I guess we'll call it, term as Secretary of Transportation. But I think Buttigieg will still get like conventionally Democrat states. I think he's more popular than Harris, and Vance is less popular than Trump. So by proxy, it seems like it will be a closer election in certain states. However, the disaster that occurred was pretty close to Pennsylvania as well, and I think Pennsylvanians do like JD Vance, so I think Vance will win the state of Pennsylvania, getting up to 238 electoral votes. I think that Buttigieg will pick someone like Gretchen Whitmer as his VP candidate, or maybe someone from Wisconsin, but Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan is probably the most likely option, so I do think he will narrowly win the state of Michigan. And Vance, for his VP candidate, I'm not quite sure who he would pick. Perhaps someone like, I don't know, maybe Brian Kemp from Georgia, Steve Lombardo from Nevada. I'm not quite sure, honestly. But it does seem like Vance does have the lead in some states that are typically Republican. For example, Arizona went to Trump by over 5 percentage points. I do think it will go to Vance in this election. I also think Nevada is interesting. The fact that it didn't shift to the left between 2016 and 2020 and then shifted pretty strongly to the right leads me to believe that Nevada in general is shifting to the right. When pretty much the whole country shifted to the left between these two elections, Nevada stayed stagnant and then it shifted to the right. So I think Nevada is a state that will go to Vance. It also has a Republican governor. Vance now has 255 electoral votes to Buttigieg's 231. He needs 15 more to win this election, which he can get from either the state of North Carolina or Georgia, or a combination of any two other states. So, as we can see, Minnesota is still left, and you might be saying, oh, Minnesota, that's a Democrat state. It went to Harris. It's gone Democrat, I think, out of every state the longest, because it didn't even go to Reagan. If I can find the election, it didn't even go to Reagan against Carter, and then didn't go to Reagan against Mondale. So it's gone Democrat for the longest out of any state in the entire union. Even Hawaii went to Reagan, but Minnesota did not. So Minnesota will likely go to Buttigieg. Harris did have a little bit of a bump because she got Tim Walz as her VP nominee. But again, Buttigieg is more popular than Harris. I do think he will win the state of Minnesota, kind of narrowly though, more narrow than it was in 2024. And now with these three states remaining, we now have the state of Wisconsin. I do think Vance is more popular in these sort of Midwest states. I think Vance is more popular in the state of Wisconsin, but again, it doesn't really matter too much because whoever wins either of these two states, if Vance can win one of them, he wins this election. But I think Wisconsin, it did go to Trump in 2024, barely went to Biden in 2020. It's always a narrow state. You can't really count on Wisconsin. But at the end of the day, North Carolina and Georgia have more electoral votes. I hate to say it, but I guess they do matter more, for lack of a better term. Sorry if you're from Wisconsin. Your cheese is good. I'll give you that. But anyway, for North Carolina and Georgia, North Carolina is one of the few swing states that went to Trump in 2020, and it went to Trump by a higher margin in 2024, a similar margin that it did in 2016. And this was also when there was unpopular gubernatorial candidate Mark Robinson basically dragging Trump down, so to speak. He is pretty crazy, I'm not going to lie. Look at his Wikipedia page if you don't believe me, or if you think that it's a biased opinion, just look at his Wikipedia page. But anyway, they had that crazy guy dragging Trump down, but now this crazy guy will likely not be running in 2028 and therefore will not be dragging Vance down. I do think Vance will win the state of North Carolina, winning the election. And then I think the state of Georgia, which did go to Trump in 2024, barely didn't in 2020 and went to Trump pretty significantly in 2016. I think Georgia generally is a Republican state. I think the Republicans had a few bad elections in Georgia, but it will typically go to Republicans. The one thing that I do think is likely in Buttigieg's favor is I think Buttigieg will win in the debates against Vance. I think he is a pretty good debater, and he will win for that reason in the debates. And in 2020, Biden won against Trump in the debates. He won the state of Georgia. Georgia's a narrow state, so maybe the debates will have an impact. But at the end of the day, Georgia typically is more of a Republican state. So unless the Republicans are very unpopular by that point, I think Vance will narrowly win the state of Georgia, winning 297 to 241 against Pete Buttigieg. So we'll see what happens. If Buttigieg picks someone like John Ossoff as his VP nominee, I could see Georgia going Democrat. But at the end of the day, Vance does win this hypothetical election. So if you want more videos, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and watch some of my other videos if you want to see some more election predictions. And thank you.